I mean, I don't really see them, but at least at the beginning, I was sort of seeing a foggy shape, but I could make out something about the clothing. And she was wearing a particular costume. And it's not what you see when you look up Hypatia on Wikipedia at all. And I thought, well, that's interesting. And then I read later, she was the only woman allowed to wear this particular robe, which was specific to male philosophers in Alexandria. But women didn't
That's
wear it. He did.
interesting.
And I thought, oh, okay. And there have been various things where I've said, okay, give me some, or give me a sign. You know, I want a sign that I can find within the next few days without, looking at obsessively on Google to find it, but something that will show up that will show me that you are who you say you are. And they show up.
Welcome to Soul Explorers with your hosts, Gary Langley and Sally Taylor. Welcome to Soul Explorers. Sally and I are very happy to introduce today Elyn Aviva and Gary White. Elyn wrote a book called The Reluctant Medium, and she's going to tell us all about what's transpired for her. Elyn and Gary, welcome to the show. It's great to have you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you, Gary and Sally, for inviting us to this podcast to share the messages and the experiences that we've been having in the last year and a half or so. And thanks to Plotinus, Hypatia, and the collective for having these conversations with me and now with Gary for the last year and a half or so, and having messages that they want us to communicate to the rest of the world.
Well, and you're getting us directly in to the content of information that we really want to spend time talking to you about. So you are basically channeling these historical figures from the past, and they are bringing through really wonderful, significant information and messages. But most people don't hear from ancient Greek philosophers on a daily basis. So tell us a little bit about how this started to happen. What was the path that got you here?
I'll start back a little ways. I'll start back by saying I'm historically a skeptic. I grew up in a humanist household where people didn't talk to spirits or didn't even believe in them or in the afterlife. I've, over the last many years, had a lot of experiences with subtle energies and things I've seen at sacred sites. We write a series of books on sacred sites in powerful places, and things happen, but I haven't channeled. I have, thanks to Cheryl Page, whom I'm sure you know because she's been on your program, and she's just two wonderful books, Mystic Richness and The Fourth Thing. But Cheryl contacted me something like 5 years ago out of the blue, and she'd been led to me by Mary Magdalene, and she thought I would think she was crazy for contacting me. And I said, no, that's fine. I'm reading about Mary Magdalene. What do you have to say? And then she suggested that we learn something about mediumship, which was the furthest thing from our minds. I mean, I could get to the point of having experiences at sacred sites, and Gary's a dowser. We learned geomancy and all of this stuff, but mediumship, I don't think so. And talking to dead people, I'd like to think it's true, but I mean, I don't know. So we started taking classes with Suzanne Giesman, and I have to say I was not very good at it. I mean, you might get a few little twingy things sometimes, but not much. And it just didn't really feel like my path, and I didn't actually want to be a medium. I was just sort of curious about finding things out and understanding different kinds of dimensions and realms of experience. And then about a year and a half ago, February 28th, 2024, we were sitting in a coffee bar in a nook in a 4-star hotel in Girona, Spain, Catalonia, Spain, where we live. And suddenly there was nobody there. I mean, it's a sort of nook in the back, and nobody knows it's there, and it's got nice little chairs and comfortable couch, and we would just like to go there and have a nice cup of coffee with nobody around us. And we figured nobody was ever there or noticed us, but we were in for a surprise because suddenly,
Well, we were discussing a possible book that we were thinking of writing called Everyday Mystics.
Yeah.
We had a title for it. And we were talking about all of the content that might be in a book like this. Afterlife things and
The
so
nature
forth, and
of
the nature of reality and
evil,
multidimensional realms and all of that.
Mhm.
So we were sitting, drinking coffee and talking about this.
And suddenly I felt this pressure on my right temple, and my eyes kind of shifted focus, and my mouth changed shape. I mean, this was such a physical experience. And this voice started coming out of me, and I was just like, wow, ah, and stopped. And then I thought, well, hey, maybe I get to channel without doing all that hard work to learn how to do it. Why not try it? So I said, okay. And this voice then proceeded to speak to me through me. And let me see if I can find there. You want to read that?
Yeah, I'll read that.
This is
Okay.
the book I have marked with the content because I don't know what they say when they come through me. I don't remember. So
This is what I heard. We humans are here to experience the full range of experience. That's why we have incarnated. We learn from the bad more than from the good. We are in the process of spiritual evolution, and we need to have the full range of experiences to evolve.
well, wow. I mean, this voice was answering the very question by the very fact that this voice came through. That was proof of life after life. This was proof of something speaking through me, that the universe did care what we were talking about. It wasn't a disinterested universe because something was listening in. And it started to leave. And I had the presence of mind because of Suzanne's courses, where she says, ask for evidence. And I thought, okay, who are you? And I saw the letter P sort of flash across my vision. And then I heard Plotinus. And I mean, I knew from, let's see, how many years ago? Maybe 60 years ago when I took Western Civ. I mean, I knew this guy was a Greek philosopher, but that's all I knew. And I thought Plotinus. And so there was Wi-Fi in the coffee nook, and I proceeded to Google and find out who he was and when he lived. And just glancing through his story, I found that he was taught his work, the Aeneas, is all about the very questions we were asking. The nature of reality, truth, the purpose of life, good and evil. One of his famous expressions is alone with the alone. And he used to do meditation practices to change his consciousness so he could unite with the one, or as close to the one as a living human being could get. So I'm going, oh my goodness. Well, I said other things, but oh my goodness, I just talked with a dead Greek philosopher who's been dead for 1700 years. And I mean, I was just in total shock. And Gary was kind of going, whoa.
Well, I said, that was interesting.
So
And
Gary, I want to ask you, what did her voice sound like when this occurred? Because she talked about the feeling of her mouth changing shape. What did you experience?
It was not her voice. It was vaguely a male voice. It was slightly accented. It was not her voice. And also, it was not the way she would speak. It was not her vocabulary.
Mhm.
So I knew immediately that we had a visit here.
Right. Well, and it sounds like since you have a little bit of a spiritual background, if you guys have written books about, sacred sites,
yeah.
that this wasn't something that made you jump out of your skin or feel like you needed to
No.
take her to see psychiatric help.
No, we didn't check her into the hospital.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, we had a context because we've been taking these classes with Suzanne
Right.
Giesman. So there was a
Right.
context, but the experience was unasked for, totally unexpected. And, you know, I- it just blew us away because even if I'm good at intellectually thinking things, but I keep things in compartments. So here I am, we're doing courses with Suzanne Giesman. We're reading about life after life, near-death experiences. I mean, reincarnation. I think I may have some vague memories of some past life or whatever, but to channel the voice of someone who's been dead for 1700 years brought it into reality in a way that my intellectual, well, it makes sense. I think it makes sense. I believe these people, but it brought it home to me in a way that nothing else would have. And it was just completely shocking.
I just heard the phrase when you were saying that, that it came at a time you weren't expecting it. And the phrase I heard was, we connect in our time, not yours. And
Yes.
um, even though they're in a timeless realm, but it's when they find the conditions correct to do it. So
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. I mean, I had a lot of conversations that are in the book. Often, I'll circle back to that in a minute, but um, about why me and why now. And they would say, well, part of it is because we've been watching you for a long time and you're finally ready. It just took you a long time. I'm 78 and it took me and Gary's 88. So, I mean, it took me a long time to get to a place where I could have this experience and not either shut it down or totally freak out.
now I do have a question here. Have you noticed in your own psyche, your own development, your own sense of the spiritual, an expansion from this connection?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, you know, I've gone through various stages with it because at first I was asking for evidence
Hmm.
and getting it. I mean, I'm not sure. I would sit down and meditate and say, okay, let's welcome. And then I would make notes and I made boundaries. I put boundaries on. I don't like to speak with their voices, and there is more than one. So I'm not comfortable with that. And I wanted to be sure they would respect my boundaries. So
And they have.
they have,
Yes.
And then we have internal conversations, which I write down and turn into a Word file, which then became the basis of the book. Um, and over time, there was Plotinus, and then he brought in Hypatia of Alexandria, who lived 100 years later, who was a Neoplatonist. He was the founder of Neoplatonism. And she was headed an academy of Neoplatonism in Alexandria 100 years later. And then there's the collective, and they've started speaking through me sometimes. So, but at first I was saying, okay, give me evidence. And Plotinus told me the name of somebody else. And well, I had no way of knowing,
And he said he was a dirty man.
He said he was a dirty man. And I thought, oh, and I looked him up, and he was about 100 years later, and or 50 years later, and he was an important Neoplatonist too, but he had a different perspective. He disagreed with Plotinus on some very important issues. So I can only think that Plotinus was saying he was a dirty man because he didn't like his perspective on things. And I asked Hypatia for evidence, and it's all in the book. I mean, she started speaking in Chinese, and I thought, what? And I looked up later and found out that the Silk Road uh, did go through Egypt, and it was quite likely that she'd had contact with people who spoke Chinese.
And you don't speak Chinese,
No.
but it was coming through you.
Well, she spoke just a few words, and I wrote them down. And when I
Okay.
tried to find out what they meant, it looks like it's a translation for Buddha's delight, which is a Chinese vegetarian dish. And so I don't know what that was about. Um, I also saw her. I mean, I don't really see them, but at least at the beginning, I was sort of seeing a foggy shape, but I could make out something about the clothing. And she was wearing a particular costume. And it's not what you see when you look up Hypatia on Wikipedia at all. And I thought, well, that's interesting. And then I read later, she was the only woman allowed to wear this particular robe, which was specific to male philosophers in Alexandria. But women didn't wear it. He did.
Interesting.
And I thought, oh, okay. And there have been various things where I've said, okay, give me some, or give me a sign. I want a sign that I can find within the next few days without, looking at obsessively on Google to find it, but something that will show up that will show me that you are who you say you are. And they show up. And I did ask Plotinus why he came through me as in channeling. And he said, because otherwise you wouldn't have believed me. I thought, you're right.
It needed to be a visceral physical experience for you, right? So let me ask, so I'm going to go back to Gary again then. So it sounds like you have also begun to channel some of these same individuals as well. How did that begin to occur for you?
What happened was, as we got into this whole year, she's channeling and producing documents that she has me read. And I would just spontaneously have answers to questions that were in the documents. And I would, I was kind of listening to myself, speaking answers to questions. And finally, not too long ago, Elyn was worried about appearing to be crazy for channeling and bringing these voices through. And Plotinus came through me and spoke in his voice, I think to reassure her that if we're crazy, we're both crazy.
Well, that's really interesting because what you're describing is what I would call conscious channeling. In other words, it's coming through you, but you're fully present as
Yes.
it's coming through. Whereas
Yeah.
what Elyn is doing is full body channeling. I'm not sure that's the right terminology, but that where they actually come in and she moves aside. But yeah, conscious channeling. So that's what
Well,
sounds.
And she's taking notes. She is a wonderful student, was a wonderful student, and she just automatically takes notes. And so she can have them coming through and writing notes, which may be almost automatic writing, I think.
yeah, it's a form.
Yeah.
Yeah.
At age 19, when I was offered the idea of majoring in composition at the university, I realized that if I was going to write for big ensembles, that I needed help. I'd written a lot of little piano pieces as a child, and I bought a book on hypnosis and taught myself to go into self-hypnosis, and found that the musical ideas came through very easily then. And that was my secret method. And my composition teachers didn't care how I got it as long as it was on the paper. So I had this kind of other experience of being in a hypnotic state. And then I realized that I could do it in dream time. And my whole technique for composing has been to compose in dream time. I wake up in the morning when I'm working on a piece. I wake up in the morning, I have an idea of where it's going, and I spend the day writing. And I spend a little time in the evening when I go to bed looking at the piece. And then the piece goes on in dream time. And I never asked where this came from. I just, I accepted it. It worked. And if it's not broke, don't fix it.
I was going to say, let me ask you a question then, because I find, and this is because I am also an artist myself, that people who are naturally creatives to start with, writers, composers, artists, they, whether they are fully aware of it or not, are typically tapping into subtle inspiration. They talk about muses, right?
Yes.
And so it sounds like, since you are both creatives, you've actually perhaps done this for much, much longer than the more dramatic ways that it's occurring now. Do you think that's true?
Absolutely. When I started getting into a meditation practice, I realized that it was familiar territory. I'd been there all of those years, and I had no idea that that's what was happening.
And Plotinus, when he's come through,
Yes.
tends to come through to Gary in dream time, which is how I was circling back to that.
Most of these things do come to me in dream time. I wake up in the morning and have to get up and get on the computer to write things down because it's been a busy night.
Right.
And strangely, I seem to have a full night's sleep. I'm rested, so I have actually been asleep, but working all night. It's
Well, that
amazing.
would suggest to me that your body is the thing that's resting, and your
Yes.
mind or your spirit, or however you want to conceive of that, is the thing
Yeah.
that continues to be active.
Yeah. The thing that Plotinus said through Elyn that really made sense to me when I asked the question, what's going on with the composition in Dreamtime? He said, the so-called Gary in this plane is watching the so-called Gary in the other plane composing. And that felt right. That's kind of the way I experience it. Is in Dreamtime, I'm kind of watching myself over there doing it. And myself includes all of the folks who are over
Yes.
there too.
So that actually gets us into some kind of deep metaphysical topics, if we want to go
Yeah.
there, which is what is the nature of who we really are, right? And so many people who are not working the ways that both of you are might think they are the physical body and they are the thoughts that go on in their mind, but there seems to be much greater layers to who we are and what we're doing on an ongoing basis. Has Plotinus or Hypatia or anybody else spoken to that particular nature of kind of conscious reality?
They've spoken about being in more than one place at once, I guess I would say, and being able to be, it's almost holographic or something. That there's part of like Michael who's comes in at the end of the book, and that's a whole nother story. But he was Michael, but he's also Marsilio Ficino in the 16th century, and he can talk to me now, but he's probably also visiting and providing information to other people. And so it's not there's just the one of me, and that I'm here, but I'm also over there somewhere as well. I should ask more questions about that.
Yeah.
That's a good question.
Yes.
Thanks. Well, one other part of that is that I've written a lot of books, including some novels. And in one of the novels, there was this character I described. It's a novel called The Journey, and it takes place in Brittany and Turkey, and it's a woman's quest for meaning in her life. And I described, and a lot of it came through, and I was apparently channeling it without realizing. The figures would show up, things would happen. I'd say, Gary, you'll never believe what just showed up. And, I'd be sitting there writing down what I was seeing or experiencing. And this one character showed up, in Brittany and he looked a certain way, and he had a name, and yada yada yada. And so he was in the novel, and I put the novel away, and didn't get published right away. And I'd shown it to a friend, and then we were in Brittany, in Aurelie in Paimpont, which is all this magical forest of Broceliande filled with the magic of Merlin and Vivienne. And it's an amazing place in northwestern France. And we were with this couple to stay, and we were going to stay in the Relais, which is like a country hotel. And I walked into the bar while Gary and our friends went to find the room. And there was this guy there. And I started talking to him, and he was very friendly, and we had a conversation. And then our friends came in, and they'd read the manuscript. And her mouth dropped open, and she said to me later, she says, "That's the guy you described in the book." And it was. I mean, it was the guy I described in the book.
Including the costume and the whole thing.
And his name was Pierre Dubois, which was a stage name, I think. He was there to film stories that he was going to relate in the forest of Broceliande. There was a crew there to film him. He wrote coffee table sized books and illustrated them on ferries and all kinds of stuff. And this guy was the guy I had described in the book. So I had a conversation with Plotinus recently, and I asked him, I said, can you explain this to me? How did I do that? I mean, how does that work? And they gave me a very complicated explanation. I said, well, was it that he came through from the other side and that's why I wrote about him? Or was he already here? In which case, why did blah, blah, blah? And they gave me a very complicated explanation, which was basically, well, it's too complicated for you to understand. It wasn't causal. It wasn't that somehow I had brought him through.
You didn't create him.
I didn't create him on this plane. He was somehow already here, but so was him on the other side already there coming through to me to be included in this book.
Well, what I'm getting is, hey, we're all connected. You just tapped into that aspect of the one.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yes.
Well, and what this makes me think of as well is the fact that mediums are very often able to connect to embodied individuals who are perhaps nonverbal or in comas or in some other state where they're not able to communicate. So why isn't that possible with other people just normally walking around their lives as well? If there is an energetic connection or something they can share at a soul level, why wouldn't they?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense, because I was still trying to figure out what they were trying to tell me. And I think you've closed that loop of we're all connected. And why not? I'm writing this novel, and I'm reading the tarot cards, which I don't know how to read, but I have a character in the book who's a tarot card reader. So I've got, an intro to tarot, and I'm drawing the cards, and I'm sort of reading them, and I'm writing them. And people afterwards said, "How could you read tarot so well? We didn't know you were a tarot card reader."
And by the way,
I'm not.
That novel actually followed the reading of the tarot cards, because what the reading became
what was
the direction of the novel from that point on.
But I didn't realize afterwards either. So, yeah.
Well, and I've taught tarot classes before as well, because it is something that I started out with. And I would always tell my students that you are the magic. The cards are pictures on a piece of paper, but they're the jumping off point. And so your interpretation is the information. And so the cards just kind of give you permission to go there. Now I like to learn the language as well, because I think the bigger vocabulary you have, the more you can get out of it, right? But it sounds like you are naturally intuitive, and so you're naturally good at reading cards.
What you're saying, it explains why I can't read the tarot cards, because when I'm in my normal mental state, I'm very intellectual. I'm very mind-centered. And so I'm going, well, I don't know what these cards mean. Where's the book? I can't interpret them. What does that symbol mean? And those colors, and what are those numbers? And what is it supposed to mean? And, I got into this whole information loop. And I go, well, I can't read them because I don't know what it means. And I need a book or 2 books or 3 books to do it. But when I'm in the creative state, yeah. And I wrote another novel more recently called The Question, which is called A Magical Fable. And the main character is a tarot card reader. And the main protagonist is, again, trying to find meaning in his life or her life. And shows up with this tarot card reader. And the tarot card reader has a number of different decks, and she's drawing them out of the air, and she's pulling the cards. And so to write, it's all very fantastic. And to write it, I had a set of, 4 or 5 different cards, decks, oracle cards and stuff on my desk, and I would pull a card. And I would then go into a description about that card. And later, like a year or two later, I went back to those cards and I was trying to match them up to the cards I described in the novel, and they weren't there. They
The
weren't there.
physical cards were not there in the decks
Vaguely,
that she described in the book.
yeah, something vaguely like it, but clearly I was
Channeling something.
I guess I shouldn't say I've never channeled before. I never thought about.
We all channel, whether we know it or not, on different levels. Now, I have a question. Have either Plotinus or Hypatia or the collective told you anything about the realm that they live in?
Oh,
yeah.
yes.
Much.
Yeah, because I have, well, I mean, I've got all, Gary said I'm compulsive. So it was like I was studying for an exam.
Before the first interview, I saw Elyn reading the entire book, pen in hand, sticky notes. Well, you can see this book is just filled with sticky notes. She was studying for the final exam on a book that she wrote.
But I don't know what they say. They say it, I write it down. I don't know what they said.
Well, I'm not surprised you're friends with Cheryl Page because her books look just like that.
Well, so your question, yes, I asked them a lot about life on the other side and what they do and how they spend their time and are they busy? And they sort of joke about that because they kind of think my questions are pretty.
Well, they laugh about you calling it time.
Well, that too. Yeah. They say, well, we don't go shopping. We don't have to cook dinner. And they will usually, there are lots of different things they say about what they do with how they do it. But it's a lot of it has to do with, I did ask Plotinus because he was interested in that realm when he was here. And he'll just say, oh, it's so much more amazing and beautiful than I ever imagined. And they indicate that, for some people, they can still be there playing golf. I mean, or, poker or whatever they're used to doing and whatever makes them comfortable. But that there is this progression towards more, they will talk a lot in terms of harmonizing and raising vibration. And they also talk about being like nested Russian dolls so that they only know what's around them. Because I'll say, well, what's it like at Unity? And they go, well, we don't know. We're not there. We make assumptions that this is where we're heading. But we actually, and they're drawing conclusions because they see certain events and experiences, but they only really know what's around them. And they don't know everything.
And they don't always agree.
No. Oh, it's
they
so
get
funny.
they get in kind of arguments.
Well, they don't argue. I mean, they're beyond arguments, but or as
But they'll discuss, right?
my human feelings, he said, I might be annoyed, but since I don't, but he and Hypatia will disagree with each other. So he'll say something about the nature of evil or how people who have been very disruptive and disharmonious in this life will behave what happens to them on the other side. And he'll say certain things, and she'll say, well, I beg to differ. And she will have a very minor disagreement with how he has expressed himself. And I think that's just fascinating that they still have enough personality, that they're not just all on the same wavelength. They still have their own frequencies and their own.
Yes, and it's also clear that they have discussed these things before, because Plotinus will say, we have agreed to disagree about this.
Yeah.
That brings up a thought. You know, I had somebody who studied Plotinus very in depth and said, well, it doesn't sound like Plotinus to me. And I said, look, if he's going to come through and speak to the 21st century human being, he's not going to use the verbiage and the way of speaking that he did in his era, because nobody would get it. Nobody
Right.
would understand it. He's
Well,
dumbed
few
it
people
down
would speak
for us.
Greek, for one thing.
So what do you speak Greek?
Right.
And
Well, and I would expect that
speak-
he would have a broader perspective by this point, right?
And yet I do think, I mean, even if the way he expresses himself is not the way he would have as a Greek philosopher, the content of what he's saying is, I do think, in agreement with what he said before. And the emphasis that, and I did promise them that I would say something about their message. Can I do that at this point?
Please. Yes, absolutely.
Read the afterword. I think that's.
Is that all right?
Yes.
So, and it's not just him, it's also Hypatia, and it's also the collective, which includes various people who kind of come and go, including Thoth occasionally. And they have comments to make about deities, because Plotinus doesn't have any interest in deities. And in fact, when I've said, well, I have my altar and I have so-and-so on the altar, he goes, what? He says, it's sort of a waste of time. He says, as long as you just, you go to them for advice, it's fine. But don't think that they're the end of the story. And he's very dismissive. And it turns out he was in real life. In fact, that's his difference between him and Iamblichus, was that Iamblichus was the one he called a dirty man, was very much into theurgy. He was very much into rituals and calling on the gods. And Plotinus thought that was all just a total waste of time. He had no interest in magic. He had no interest in the deities. He was interested in the one.
I would concur with him. I mean, it's the same with organized religions of any type. They're a stepping stone, but they're not the end all be all. And hopefully it brings us into our own power. And then we realize tarot cards, everything, they're just stepping stones. They're tools. And, but to get caught in a specific religious belief, I think can become a trap. So I sort of agree with him on that.
So it's okay if I...
Oh, absolutely.
Yes, please.
I mean, the short version is they came through because they have a very important message at this time for everybody on the planet. And the short version is that there is life after life. There's continuity of consciousness. We're all connected across time and space and multiple dimensions. And love is what holds everything together. That's the very short version. And a slightly longer one is, I've summarized with their permission, what their messages are. And the one from Hypatia, which has really shifted.
It's my watchword at this moment. What you do to others, you do to yourself. And to me, that takes the golden rule and writs it large, because what you do to anyone else, you're doing to yourself, which is obvious if we're all one.
Even to the degree of holding a judgment about someone, because
Exactly.
we don't realize what brought them to the place where they are, and they're working out their path. They're working out their awakening in their own way. So who are we to judge what somebody else is going through? I mean, I think that's beautifully said, Gary. And we have to sort of restructure the way we've been taught
Oh,
uh,
yeah.
through our education system and handed down, certain ways of thinking from generation to generation. We've got to break that mold and realize that not so much from our head, come from our heart a little more.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, well, they also say we are all one, and more of what you're saying. We are all connected. Separation is an illusion. Remember who you truly are, the light within, connected to everything and everyone. Underneath everything is the foundation of peace, love, compassion, and connection. There is purpose and love in the universe. Love is the universe. We are real. There is more than this petty material world you fight over. There is life after life. Consciousness continues. We're always here, not there, which is another one of my favorite lines from them. I'm saying, are you there, Plotinus? He goes, I'm not there, I'm here, you know? So, um, and now is the time. It is of central urgency and importance for humans to remember to love each other, and not just humans, but all living things, plants, animals, the earth itself. These are challenging times for humanity and planet Earth, full of potential and possibility to rise out of disharmony and fraught with danger if you do not. You must do all you can to alleviate suffering, to restore harmony, and to act with loving kindness and compassion. The purpose of life is to grow in knowledge and experience and in love and light, to live to your fullest potential, to live from your heart with heart and love, to feel your unity with the all, to be a blessing to others and send blessings. Love one another and remember to have fun. Play. It's not so serious. You will get another chance and another and another. You are so very loved.
That's beautiful. And exactly the way I have over time come to understand. They're very consistent in their message that we've received from all the great teachers, both embodied and disembodied. So you haven't said a single thing that I can find fault with. So thank you for sharing that with us.
Well, at one point I was saying, well, what you're saying sounds a lot like what I hear from others. And they go, yeah, because it's true.
Yeah,
It's
it's
not
a consistent message.
yeah.
Yeah.
So the book itself, which I'll show the cover, which is available on Amazon and stuff as both an ebook and a Kindle and a print copy. Where was I going with that?
Where else can people find, yes, anything that has been your creative output? Where can they find you?
Go to www.pilgrimsprocess.com. That's pilgrimsprocess.com. That's our website. We still have, I guess, a publishing company. And there are a lot of books there by other people as well as ourselves, and all of our Powerful Places series in Powerful Places in Malta, Powerful Places in Brittany. They're all there. My novels are there. This book is there. And the book is this compilation of all of these messages, but also what was going on in our lives during the last year and a half. And how, as you asked, Gary, has this, I think it was you, how has this changed you spiritually? Have you expanded? And I think you'll see that in the story, how it's really shifted both of us into a much more peaceful and loving place to be with each other and with everyone.
Yeah.
Which is not to say that we don't have still problems and act in very human ways. It's part, I think, of being here. But we give each other a lot more love and affection, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, we had a lot of struggles in part of this because they came through us in Dreamtime to do a musical project, which is sort of an interactive opera, you could call it, called Celebration, exclamation mark. And I did the libretto and Gary did the music. And he hasn't composed in 30 odd years and didn't want to. But they gave us this task and they said they'd be there to support us. And it turned out we did not work very well together. And it caused all kinds of relationship stresses. And I mean, I was talking to Plotinus a lot, going, whoa, how do I get through this? And how do I do this differently? And Gary was struggling. And I mean, all that's in the book.
Yeah.
And we finally did it.
I was a professional composer. There's the score for this piece. And when I was doing this, I was a driven professional. And that was a person that was not very loving and kind. I was single-minded. And that all came back. I thought I'd left that all behind, but when we got this message that I was going to have to be a composer again after 30 years, not only did I have to go out and lease the software that we need nowadays to produce a score, but I had to pick up this being that I had been all of those years, and all of that came back with it.
It was very unpleasant. I hadn't known him in those years. I met him when he had just took early retirement at age 57. We got married then. He quit being a composer. We'd done all these book series together and stuff, but I'd never known him as a composer. And it was not a happy sight. It was just not.
I wanted to comment on something you said. Yes, we're certainly embodied in a human body, and all those emotions come up. There's a difference, though. Once you start tapping into this awareness, it may come up, but it does not cling to you, and it does not become your story.
Yep.
Because there are people that hang on to, I'm so angry at this person because they said this, and they'll go on for months with it. And it may arise for, someone who has begun to tap into the greater reality, but it doesn't stay. It's like a passing cloud. It just moves right through. So
yeah. I would just kind of watch myself doing this. I would see me being that person and not liking it, and sometimes being stuck with it, because, well, to be a professional composer is a very disciplined thing. You do not do that. You don't produce an orchestral score without a lot of discipline. And that would come through, and I would say, I'm going to quit. I can't do this. In fact, I would at one point was so angry that with myself, because I was being this person, that I was going to just erase the entire piece off my computer and stop. And Elyn, being the sensible person she was, said, "You can't do that. The piece is mine too. You don't have permission."
Well, and the irony is the whole celebration, the message we got in the dream was it was about raising the vibration of the planet, about realizing we're all connected. And it starts with gratitude and moves to an embodied experience of the elements, and then the interrelationship of everything, and then sort of Indra's web, the unity, and then oneness. And I kept going, we can't do this if we're not able ourselves to raise our vibration to a place of oneness and connection.
And I was failing it.
We both did. I think, Gary, you're further along on being able to detach from the story, because we were just really kind of sopping in the middle of it, and all
of that's in the book. Elyn reveals all in this book, I will say.
Well, it's actually an expurgated version, but
And I want to tell you something that I have been thinking about and noticing and watching the whole time we've been having this conversation. You have obviously embodied that lesson really well, because the whole time you guys have been speaking together, you have been so in sync. You have, picked up where the other leaves off. You face each other in recognition of the conversation. And so I've been in awe of your relationship just as I've watched the conversation. So if anything, you've done a good job.
You caught us on a good day.
Well, and we have to thank Plotinus and Hypatia,
Yeah.
the collective, for their wisdom and their support, and for some other people who helped us along the way that we talk about in the book. But it is the goal. I mean, what Gary says so succinctly, this Gary, you on the screen there, about not getting stuck in the story and just, letting it just pass over you and not knowing that we're so much more than the story.
And remembering that it's a story.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's sort of, a holographic experience that we're having, so it's a story, but it's exhilarating and a place to learn and grow. I mean, even some of our biggest tragedies, and I was telling you about one of mine before we came on air, I grew so much from that. I mean,
Mhm.
it was tragic and it was horrible, but I grew from it. It was like something cracked open inside me. So what Plotinus was telling you about our hardest experiences are often the catalyst for our biggest growth. Is very true.
Thank you guys so much for getting on and telling your story, because if I understand correctly, this is all fairly recent with regard.
Oh,
It's been in the last year and a half that these things began to come forward for you.
I started writing it. I decided after a year of messages from them. So February 28th this year, I thought, okay, it's time to get the message out there. They've been pushing me for months, but it seemed like the reasonable place. So a year's worth of messages. And so I started writing it, putting together the messages in March, and was published in July. Gary did the production, and since we have a publishing company, he knows what to do, and we just got it out there as quickly as we possibly could. So it's all very new.
Let me ask you one last thing, and maybe this is something for another visit. But at some point, I would love to talk to you about your experience with sacred sites and how perhaps, and maybe you'll tell us just a little bit about how you think that work prepared you for the work you're doing now.
Love to. And I will say what they're saying basically is thank you. Thank you to Sally and Gary for getting their message out there. That is what they'd like to have you know.
Oh, very nice. Very
Our
nice.
pleasure.
Well, it's been wonderful having you. I'm sure with future books on the way, according to those on the other side, then we'll be having you back, I hope.
Thank you. Your
And
pleasure.
and as Sally said, we do want to talk to you more about the sacred sites, and that would be exquisite. So
9 books in the Powerful Places series, and another one where we talk to one of our geomancer teachers at length about the energies and how they work and how places become powerful. And Gary's a dowser. He wrote a book on dowsing. So yeah, love
Fantastic.
to.
We will put a link to those in the description.
Okay,
Great.
thank you. Thank you very much.
thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
If you enjoyed this content, please hit like, subscribe, and ring the bell for notifications.